Well, okay, we'll go ahead and get started here. It is 7 o'clock, so we'll be timely. I know everyone has a lot of different things pulling for your attention right now, especially this time, and I really appreciate you all taking the time out to join us. I'm really happy to have Dr. Cureton with us tonight. Barbara and I got to know each other many years ago on the IDA, San Diego International Dyslexia Association Board of Directors, and got a chance to work together there and get to know one another's work. And it's been a few years since we've done something together, so it's really
true.
To have the chance to have you here. And I know this time is very challenging in a lot of ways for a lot of people, but there's some specific challenges when you have a child with ADHD at home during this time.
Right.
So I'll hand it off to you and let you give your own introduction beyond that. But just thank you for being here with us tonight, Dr. Cureton. And for everyone who is joining us from home, just please make sure that your video and your sound stays off, because we're recording so we can share this out with everybody who wasn't able to be here tonight, or if you guys want to review any parts that you might need to see again, or maybe you have to duck out in a minute, you'll have the recording afterwards. We'll be emailing that out to everybody who registered for tonight's talk. And we do invite you to add any questions to the chat feature, and we'll go through those at the end. So please, put those in there if they come to you throughout the presentation, or if something you just comes to mind while we're going through questions. Feel free to keep adding them in here. And I think that's about it with housekeeping. So I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you, Megan. I'm Barbara Cureton. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I have been in private practice since about 2004, with prior experiences working in medical groups. Throughout all of this time, though, my focus has been on assessing and working with children, adolescents, and adults who have ADHD. And I spoke with Megan probably about a month ago or so, and we were talking about coming up with some kind of program, and I was thinking about what am I seeing in my practice at this time, and I'm seeing a lot of stress, and felt that it might be helpful to discuss how some of this may play out with students who have ADHD. When we have events like this that are nationwide events, the news feed it's 24 hours. It's on all of our devices. It's everywhere. There's pictures, there's statistics, there's conflicting viewpoints about things, and it's very stressful. It's for everybody to try to take in the appropriate information, to determine what you tell your child about these things, and then also to just deal with what has been happening in terms of being out of school, being at home most of the time, and not doing a lot of the types of things that you as a family were probably doing. And I think there's a couple of issues. One is, just really what do you tell your child about these types of issues that are going on? And I will talk a little bit about that later on. And even if you feel like you've done a pretty good job with how you've talked about this with your child, there can be, I think, if we look at this a little bit more closely, we may see where some of this stress is coming from. Yes, they're out of school, but what does that really mean? And so I wanted to think about that a little bit. And then my other goal was to see what we can do to come up with some ideas about, understanding the behavior that you're seeing at home and what you can do about it. And so that's what the majority of my slides will be about. And but I wanted to first talk a little bit about, what are kids missing by being out of school? And there are some obvious academic things that kids are missing, but they're also missing their friends. And at and that is obvious. It's, pretty straightforward. But if we think about that in more depth, it is a very complicated thing. So, kids are out of the house about 6 hours a day, and during that time, they're having lots of minute-by-minute interactions with other kids, and they have someone to share with, they have someone to talk to, they can make plans for recess, they have shared experiences in the classroom, maybe laughing at a joke somebody said, and all of that is pretty much gone right now. They have leadership experiences in the classroom. They're given jobs to do. They're maybe helping a friend with a math problem, maybe organizing a game on the playground. They're acknowledged and recognized and receive smiles from their teacher, their principal, other staff members, and it lets them know that they're seen in the outer world. So not just in your home and how you interact, but also in the larger world. And it also provides students with a sense of independence. They're out of the house, they're managing their day-to-day without mom and dad. They're entrusting the adults in their life to be there, to provide safety and support, but they're managing themselves. And part of that is based on the routines that they have at school. So school from the first couple of days in August and September is about learning about how we're going to get through this classroom. How do we interact with each other? What are the rules? What's going to be, how we're going to start the day, how we're going to proceed through the day. So there's a very structured sort of routine to the day at school. And many kids are also missing that. School also provides an opportunity for kids to share strengths and get acknowledgement from other kids about their strengths. And those strengths are not, again, just academic, but they might be social, they might be music, they might be art, it might be athletics. And I would posit that for many adults, we're all going through the same exact thing working from home, that many of our day-to-day experiences, just walking through the hall, commenting to, a coworker, those kinds of moments aren't happening, and that is a loss. And it impacts. So we are losing that kind of support at the same time that we're in a situation where there's a lot of stress. And so what I am, well, kids may not articulate this as stress. They may not say, I'm feeling stressed or I'm feeling anxious necessarily. What you might be seeing is them either describing or acting out with more frustration, with full-blown kind of anger and out of control actions. Maybe it's anxiety, fears, worry, maybe there's grief, maybe there's more crying that's going on at home. And there may be changes in their sleep and in their food consumption. And again, I would say, yeah, that's probably true for a lot of us adults as well, that some of our typical coping mechanisms are maybe not working as well as they used to under this level of stress and change that we're trying to cope with. And I think it's good to acknowledge as a parent what this is like for you as well, not just in terms of your child with ADHD, but also as a parent perhaps with ADHD. We do know that, ADHD is a genetic disorder, and that, probably somebody very close nearby in their house also has ADHD, and that can make it more challenging as well. So I'm going to start with the slides. We can go through the next slide. And I wanted to just start briefly with looking at, the diagnostic criteria for ADHD, both inattentive type and the hyperactive impulsive type. Probably many of you are familiar with these terms. I don't feel like we need to go through them. The issue with this type of diagnostic list is that it doesn't necessarily speak to why this is happening, and how it might play out in your day-to-day life, and or necessarily what to do about it. It doesn't necessarily provide that. You can go to the next slide. So these are the hyperactive, impulsive features. Here's a hyperactivity. And again, not everybody will show all of these symptoms. Sometimes they present differently in girls and in boys. Sometimes we will see that there may be differences in terms of, kids who are gifted, that they may not be identified until later. But generally speaking, you're going to find some of these items to be true. And then we can look at the next slide. And here are the impulsivity kinds of things. And I think in particular, with impulsivity, it often looks like misbehavior. And I think, again, it's important to try to understand where, what's happening with this behavior. So you see a behavior at home, why is this happening? And sometimes we can look to some of these diagnostic definitions as a way to try to understand why certain behaviors are happening, and then figure out what to do. I think, just jumping in and managing sometimes or punishing doesn't necessarily get us to the point where we want to be. We can look at the next slide. And I think it helps to really think about ADHD as difficulty with your ability to regulate. And that includes regulate your attention, your activity level, your impulses, executive functions, your affect, and your sleep. Many students will have difficulties in some or even all of these areas. Attention seems pretty straightforward at the surface level. So it's that ability to focus. Can you focus when you need to focus? But it is also consists of a variety of cognitive features that include things like arousal. So if you're engaged in something, and we have this simple task of mom says it's time to get dressed and make sure you bring down your laundry when you come. The arousal component is just noticing that something has been said. So I'm like, huh? Something has happened. What has happened? So I have aroused myself to the situation. And then I'm going to need to shift from whatever it is I'm doing. So let's say I'm watching cartoons. And now I need to shift my focus to mom because something's happening with her. I heard a voice. I'm looking over there. I'm orienting in that direction. I may evaluate, is this important or not? And decide that it's early in the morning. It's probably not too important. Maybe I'll go back to my cartoons. And if I do get my attention over there, can I focus long enough and deep enough to actually take in enough of the details? So not only am I supposed to go upstairs and get dressed, but I also need to grab my laundry. And so I don't want to, if I'm going to do this accurately, I want to be able to focus long enough to be able to catch all of that information. And then I need to organize a response. So I go upstairs, it's time to get dressed. What does that mean? Do I need shoes right now, or can I just be barefoot? There is a variety of things that need to be sorted out. And as there are that many steps to actually focusing and completing a task, there are that many ways that can fall apart for a child. We can also take a look at activity level. And what we're talking about here with the regulation of activity is that the level of activity does not fit the situation. Child is either too hyper or too sluggish. And again, if we look at this issue of go get dressed and bring down your laundry, maybe I am running around in the living room because I'm full of energy and now I'm not really focusing as well. And it's impossible for me to make movement toward what I need to do because my activity level is at the wrong place. It can also be that because my activity level is high, but I'm making lots of silly noises. I'm bugging my sister or my brother. They're getting upset. Now we're going to get into a fight probably. So again, there's many ways in which that difficulty with regulating that activity level can get in the way of actually doing the simple task of go upstairs and bring down your laundry. When I get upstairs, I need to engage my working memory that, oh yes, I'm supposed to bring down my laundry. I need to organize and find all my laundry. I need to do this in some time frame that I think mom has for me. So I have to manage my time, pay attention to what I'm doing, not get distracted by something else, and then end up taking too long to complete the task. And now mom is mad because what are you doing? Where are you? And so again, many steps along the way that the simple task can fall apart. It can also be that regulating affect can be a problem for kids with attention problems. The most typical thing is the overreaction. So mom says it's time to go get dressed, grab your laundry. I'm watching cartoons. I'm mad. I immediately go 0 to 60 and have a hard time. She asked a very simple thing. She wasn't upset. I'm overreacting. I'm unable to regulate my affect to the situation, what's been asked of me, which then creates more problems. And sleep can be a problem. So for kids with attention problems, they can have difficulty with falling asleep, being able to quiet their mind and quiet their body to be able to actually fall asleep, as well as it can be hard to arouse and awaken in the morning. And so some of these kids will be very grumpy in the morning, and it's really because of their arousal system not being well regulated. And so anybody says anything and, you know, a request has been made and I'm feeling grumpy, I'm not really awake, you're asking me to do something, and my response will be to be upset and overly angry about something that is, again, a simple task that the child is really able to do. It's not that the task is too complicated or not within the skill set. And this is, I think, you know, one of the biggest challenges is that it makes it very challenging for parents because you know the child can do this, and yet somehow it is not happening. And I think that is in many ways the crux of what the difficulty is at home with kids who have ADHD. It is not that they can't do things, but they have difficulty regulating their ability to do it consistently. And it's, I think that's confusing as well to parents sometimes, because some days are great. Everything goes smoothly. The child gets up, they're in a good mood. Mom mentions, go upstairs, grab your clothes. Yes, sure thing, mom. And they run upstairs and grab their stuff. Everything comes down that's supposed to come down. And the next day, nothing happens. Nothing works the way it should. Every component of this process becomes a challenge for the child. Sometimes this issue with sleep also impacts being able to eat in the morning. So I have a number of students who have had difficulties with arousal in the morning. They can't quite wake up quickly and easily. They're grumpy, and food seems nauseating. They're just absolutely not interested in eating. Now, if you're at home, this is maybe not such a big deal because you can postpone and eat a little bit later when they're more fully alert. But if you have to go off to school, this is a problem because it may be that breakfast is then skipped. And, you know, we want kids to be going to school with appropriate nutrients in their bodies so their brains can work. It makes it that much harder when they're not. And we can go to the next slide. I did want to talk also about some positive traits of having ADHD. And I think, you You may have seen these at home, but kids with ADHD who have combined type, who have all that extra energy, they can sometimes work very quickly with very creative ideas. They notice things others don't notice. They're quick, they're spontaneous, they're quick to forgive. They have infectious personalities, a great sense of humor, high energy, willing to do things. If you know, let's go do this, great, an adventure, and off we run. And for kids who have primarily inattentive type, we can look at the next slide. Some of their strengths, again, humor is also good. They are quiet observers. They may appear to be just daydreaming and thinking about nothing, and yet be very reflective and have very deep thoughts about things, and tend to be, you know, passionate, tend to be, to care deeply about things as well. Okay, we can switch to the next slide. And so, you know, in a general sense, when thinking about parenting, I think it's helpful. I put some things that I think I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about. And the first one is visualize the outcome. And what I mean by this is having a sense of where are you going? What is your purpose? How are you, as a parent, what do you value? What do you hope for your child? And it may be even as simple as that they're happy. You know, whatever they choose to do, whatever they, you know, in terms of education, what they want to do, the real thing that would make you feel like you had an impact would be is if they're happy in their life. And so I think it's helpful to think about this and have a sense of what is the most important thing to you for your child. And then to try to visualize that. I mean, literally try to find a symbol for yourself that you can hold on to. So again, as I think when parents have children who have ADHD, there's often an adult in the family who has ADHD. And being able to sometimes hold that visual in your head about that represents your outcome can help you be the parent you want to be versus acting out of impulse or reactivity or intensity or any of the other kinds of struggles that we talked about that the children go through who have ADHD. And it could be, again, something really simple as, you know, a sun, a cartoon looking sun with a smiley face that you see independently going across the sky. And when you're in those moments where you're finding yourself all wound up and bothered and upset about something, trying to pull that visual will help you respond out of logic and problem solving and thinking it through versus just the intensity that you're feeling at the moment. It's the thing that can help you do the stop and think. And so I think it is important to think about, talk about between partners, the parents of the child, what do we hope for? And how can we symbolize that and use that as a way to help guide and manage how we interact with the child. The other another thing that I think is really important is taking a strength-based approach. So we talked just briefly about some of those strengths, and humor was a big one for both of the inattentive children and the hyperactive impulsive child. And how can you use that to help get through what you need to get through, for example? So, excuse me. For example, maybe that example of going upstairs, grabbing your laundry and bringing it back down. Throw it out there. Do you want to do it as a gorilla or do you want to do it as a kangaroo? So for a younger child, you know, that seems like that might be fun, kind of fun. How can you bring fun into it? For older students, older kids, maybe music is the way to do that. Maybe they really enjoy listening to music, and when you need them to participate and be a, help with the chores, that sort of thing. Maybe music is the way to do that. Is, they get to pick a song, you get to pick a song, and you get the work done that way. So thinking about what really makes their boat float, and using those strengths that they have as a way to kind of work through the things that need to get worked through. I also think that it is really helpful to join with your child and take a scientific approach to addressing issues. And what I mean by that is that when you have those moments where things are calm and it's just, there's not, the other kids aren't around, there's not going to be a situation of shame or teasing and things like that, but where you have a quiet moment together, is to talk about, something like, I've noticed that in the morning, we really have a hard time sometimes. You get mad, I get mad, we can't seem to get out of the house on time, and that must be so upsetting to start your day that way. And then you listen and see what the child says. And so first of all, we're just going to notice some things, and we're going to validate whatever their feelings are. And then we're going to think about this. And, if we thought about this as a scientist, what we would do is we would come up with some hypotheses about why this is so hard. And then we would come up with some ways to address the problem. We would check it out, see if it works, maybe, give ourselves a score on it. And if it's not working, we'll just try something else. And when it's working, great, we've got something that we can use. And this takes I think, in part, you're working together on a problem. You have owned part of the ownership of the problem, and you're both going to take a role in how to solve the problem. And you're going to address it and evaluate it. And it's not then the onus is not on the child to be a better person or to behave or, these sorts of things. It's really about, can we find the right strategy to do what we need to do so that we can all get through some of these things that have to get done and come on the other side of it feeling good about ourselves. And so I think, this moves the situation away from blaming, from being negative, from putting down, to a place where we can talk and look at things and we can problem solve. And all of those skills help your child develop resilience as well, because they can see themselves as being able to figure out how to do things better. And that will apply to the rest of their life. I also think it's really important to validate the feelings of your child, their beliefs and their thoughts. It doesn't mean that what they say necessarily is true or that it is the only way to look at the situation, but it does show that you're listening, that you hear what they're thinking, and you hear what they believe, and you hear what they're thinking. You can always talk about providing other sources of information if they need it, because what they're thinking about it isn't exactly correct. And it doesn't mean that you change what your thoughts are about how things should be done. It just means that we're validating that they have a perspective. And lastly, I also think it's really important that as a parent, that you become educated about the issues that are related to ADHD. Your being here today is part of that. And it's an ongoing process, because as your child grows, as the child matures, as they reach new developmental stages, there's going to be different issues. And the same is for you as an adult. As we age, some of those issues of ADHD may also alter and change. It may change how you handle things, how you cope, all of those sorts of things. And so it's important to take a kind of lifelong learner approach to understanding both yourself and your child and what their needs are. And I think, again, it takes you back to the third one, joining with your child and taking a scientific approach to addressing issues. It means that we can always address things, we can talk about things, and we can figure out solutions to things. All right, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So what are some just basic interventions? And the reason I'm starting here is that with added stress, with added worry, with added even grief, I think, for some kids, some of the things that you would have said were no longer an issue may be coming back as an issue, so that there may be some regression that is occurring under the stress that we're dealing with at this time. And so it may be helpful and important to go back and look at, again, breaking tasks into smaller steps, relying on routines, making sure that when you're giving a direction to the child that you're touching, they're making eye contact, that you're using lists again. So even if the skill was a skill that you could reliably depend on from the child, that you said it and they would be able to go and do it, that may not be true right now. And pay attention to what is working, so that again, I think the more tricks that you have in your bag that you can pull out as needed, the more helpful that is. I would also add here that when you're giving directions and you want your child to do something, so we're talking about, again, like go upstairs, get dressed, and bring down your laundry, it is very helpful to have them repeat back sometimes, just tell me back what I've asked you to do as a way to do it. I would say it's important also to avoid repeating yourself. Instead of repeating the same exact thing, I would put it into a question. What have I asked you to do? And when did I expect you to do it? And is it done? All right, so what do you need to do? And so you're giving a little bit more structure in that, and you're asking them to rely on their working memory and pull that up and put it back in the front of their brain versus the toy that they were playing with. And I think that this, in the long run, ends up also being less frustrating for the child, because they know they really can do it. They're just not able to do it right now. So what feels like is nagging, and the parent is getting frustrated because I've told you 3 times and you still haven't done it. And so if we can avoid that situation, then we're headed down a better path. And so again, let's visualize, what do we want? How do we want this interaction with our child to go? What is that picture we're thinking of? And part of that might be also keeping in mind that what is happening, the task isn't done, is a failure of the attention system versus a manipulation by the child or a refusal to do something, and that instead it is they lost track of it. They can't remember it once they got upstairs, they got distracted, that it's part of this attention problem. And so it is more helpful to try to look at this as a teaching moment. And again, it could be, I tell you to go upstairs and do things, and it doesn't happen. I wonder how we can improve on that. Maybe is it helpful to have a sheet of paper that's a list of the things I want you to do up there? Is it helpful to have a list in your room? Is it helpful so you can then problem solve, versus if you have gotten to the point where you're frustrated and the child is frustrated, problem solving will not occur at that point. And so we want to be able to try to stay in that moment where we can be problem solving and maintaining a more even keel. Okay, we can go to the next slide. I don't know if people are aware of Jessica McCabe. She has a YouTube channel called How to ADHD. I love this channel. It really is, most of it is like adult sorts of things, but they're short, they're great, she's fun, and I would highly recommend it because it also helps you think about what can you do as a parent and how can you use this information. She had, boredom is, we think of boredom sometimes as, well, the student just doesn't like that thing, or it's hard for them to do, and so they say they're bored. But in actuality, boredom is having difficulty with focusing your thoughts. And she used the analogy that, sometimes her thoughts are like butterflies in a tornado. And I thought, wow, that is just, it is such a perfect description of this, that, there's lots of thoughts, but there's no way to make them coalesce. There's no way to bring it together and have a direction that they can go in. On this particular YouTube video, How to Give Your Brain the Stimulation It Needs, she talks about making a dopamine menu. And dopamine is a neurotransmitter that helps us feel satisfied and motivated and helps us focus and things like that. And so she talks about how to create that. And again, I think this is very relevant for kids as well. And here are just a couple of things that might be the kind of thing that could be on that list. And we can go to the next slide. Within taking movement breaks just means, get out and move around. And there is some research to suggest that, like 20 minutes of exercise will help kind of regenerate those neurotransmitters in the part of the brain that we do need for focus. And so while it may seem like this draws out the completion of homework, for example, it may in the long run make it more efficient. Versus sitting and staring and really not being able to think or do anything. That's the time to stop and do something else that's going to help put your brain in the right place. And taking movement breaks might be one of those. The other thing about the other strategy is stop. And stop is, I think, good for a whole variety of different situations. It literally is to say to yourself, stop, take a breath, observe what are your feelings, what are your actions, what are your thoughts, and then make a plan and proceed. So, for example, it could be that in a situation where you're having difficulty focusing and you have migrated towards looking at YouTube videos, even if they are good ones, that may not really be what you need to be spending your time on. That maybe you really need to be doing something else. And so at that point, and what's happening is you're unable to really focus. And so you've gone to something which is very stimulating, and that is what's helping you get your brain to focus. In this situation, we're observing that, yeah, I'm really unfocused. I am doing this thing. Do I really need to be doing this thing? Could I be doing something else? Well, how about if I do 5 more minutes of this thing and then I will, go finish my paperwork. But it's a way of stopping and checking in. And this is also helpful for those intensity moments. So when things are, you find yourself winding up, or even when your child finds himself winding up, teaching this as a strategy can be very helpful. So again, stop, take a breath. Okay, I'm feeling really at wit's end here. This is not going to be productive. I should take a break and then come back and deal with this later. And so it's a simple strategy, but it's a very effective strategy for managing many aspects of attention problems. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And for a lot of kids with ADHD, it is hard to slow down. So for example, especially at the end of the day, when a child is less regulated, their activity level will get higher and their impulsivity may get higher. And so what we need to find then are things that may work with the child to help them switch gears, where they can change the intensity of what they're feeling. Some of those things, again, are deep breathing, doing slow movements like yoga. There are strategies for deep muscle relaxation, which entails tensing, holding tightly to muscle groups, and then releasing. And so it's for tensing for the count of 5, releasing for the count of 5, tensing for the count of 5, and releasing for the count of 5. And it can be done either as a whole body tense or in a relaxation strategy. Sometimes it's done starting like with the feet, hold them up into a tight little ball, release, hold it into a ball, and release, then to your calves and thighs, and all the way up your body to your face. And for some kids, things like this at bedtime can be helpful with being able to slow down, quiet their body, quiet their mind. They're counting to 5 while they hold, so their mind's not jumping all over the place. So some of those things that are typically used for anxiety and relaxation can also be just good for kids who have a lot of difficulty with transitioning from high intensity and hyperactivity to needing to be quiet and quiet their body. We can go to the next next slide. When ADHD is a component in the family, it can be even more difficult to resolve situations in a calm manner. And part of this is that it is difficult to, sometimes difficult to disengage emotionally and be able to speak calmly. So for kids who have attention problems and who are impulsive and hyper, when there is a lot of intensity around them, people are angry and there's a lot of yelling and loud noise and stimulation, they are going to respond in kind. So whereas maybe a typical child, if you raise your voice a little bit, they hear it, they acknowledge that, oops, and they will back down or leave the situation or find a resolution to it. With a child who's impulsive and who is already a little upset, if you come into that situation with anger, they are going to respond in kind. And so it can sound disrespectful. It can be, words of intense words of anger that they come back with. I hate you. I hate this house. I hate what's going on, and name calling and throwing things, because they have a dysregulated affect system and a dysregulated impulse system. So whatever is happening in the environment, to the extent that that's an intense environment, it's much more likely that's how they're going to respond. And it's really difficult to not respond in that way, especially for younger children. So if you want to change the situation, you need to disengage emotionally, to speak calmly, to maybe lower your voice, talk quieter, maybe separate whoever's arguing and fighting in the room, and take the time to let this situation, let the child regroup, get calm and regroup. There's always time to problem solve. It doesn't need to happen immediately. And again, I would say we can go back to what we talked about earlier, which is maybe you need to use that visual to help you stop and take a breath, think about how you're feeling, think about what the situation is, and wait for the calm so that you can problem solve. And you know, use the scientist approach to, you know, you and your brother get into it all the time around this, you know, around the computer. What can we do differently so that doesn't always happen? Everybody gets upset. It's not any fun at that point. What can we do differently? And sometimes, you know, kids will have a hard time being reasonable at first, but if you keep at it, you'll find that they, you know, these kids are smart. They come up with solutions. And it's not about, it's clear that it's not about blaming them or that they're bad. It's about finding a way to get along. It's easier to find solutions. And I would say that, you know, for the most part, the goal is to resolve the conflict, make amends as needed, and determine if a consequence is needed. I would say use the smallest consequence possible if it's needed to accomplish the goal. The goal here is to help your child learn how to regulate, how to manage their emotions, how to manage their behavior. And often with kids who have attention problems, punishment doesn't work very well. You can take everything away and it doesn't change their behavior. They need to learn how to solve problems. But it can be that a consequence may help. So for example, if playing video games becomes such an intense experience for the child, so they're very impulsive, they get angry and they start, you know, hitting the computer or pounding on the keyboard or things like that, you have rules. And one of the rules is you don't destroy the equipment. And so it may be that, number one, they lose the equipment for the day or the next day. But in the meantime, you're talking about, okay, you really like to play that computer game. You really like to be on the computer. How can we make that happen without you losing your computer time because of the way it upset you? And I think, you know, if they want to get back on the computer, they're going to come up with some solutions. We can try them out, see how they work. And in the meantime, they've only lost it for a day, so there's an opportunity to learn. If you take the computer away completely, there's no opportunity to learn. They're still going to have the issue with how to manage their emotions. And we can go on to the next slide. Let's see here. Oh yeah, we're doing okay, I think. And so we get back down to teaching self-regulation. Sometimes that can be self-talk. I need to calm down. I can handle this. 5 deep breaths, some kind of guided visualizations in terms of relaxation. Imagine yourself walking down the forest path and hearing the stream and the birds and things like that. We want to get to a point where maybe the child will remove him or herself from the situation. So if they begin to notice when they are escalating, can they remove themselves from the situation to avoid an outburst? And it's okay to find distractions as a way to self-regulate. So reading, music, art, building something would be good distractions as a way to help calm. Exercise, going outside and shooting some hoops, or, you know, taking a run around the neighborhood, or biking, things like that. It may be that as you're beginning that process of working on self-regulation, you know, right above the computer, you put up a sign: I can handle how I feel. I may need to calm down. I can take 5 deep breaths to calm down. So it's right there, you know, out of sight is out of mind for a lot of kids with attention problems. Sometimes signs are good. All right, we can go to the next slide. One of the other, I think, really key strategies for parents is not arguing. You know, we have rules, and hopefully that set of rules isn't too complex, but it's basic and it covers what needs to be covered. And so rules are things that they're not going to change. They're the rules, and regardless of what the individual says, the rule is still going to be the rule. However, so getting into an intellectual argument about why we have that rule in a moment is not going to happen. You should avoid. You should try to avoid getting into arguments that, you know, are based on logic. That's just going to I mean, kids who have ADHD often are very articulate. They have a lot of energy behind them. They're impulsive. They can keep talking and talking and talking. And in the meantime, whatever that rule was or whatever you had asked them to do, it's not happening. And so the way that by falling into this arguing about something, whether it needs to be done or not, doesn't work. And instead, I would recommend doing the broken record technique. I understand you feel that this is really, really unfair and that you think I'm favoring your brother right now. However, or irregardless, what am I asking you to do? What was I expecting of you, and when did I want you to do it? And you can also, I think, say, you know, I understand that you feel this is unfair. We can have a discussion later, but right now, I need you to X. And that's it. I mean, don't go any further than that. Any further discussion and you have lost, because they have lots and lots of energy and they will talk and talk and talk and nothing will happen. I think the other thing that's really important for parents is not to take it personally. Children who are impulsive say nasty things sometimes and overreact in situations. This is not about disrespect. It is not about not loving you. It is about the way their brain works. And so we need to figure out instead how to help them be also the people they want to be. All right, we can go to the next slide. So in this time where everybody's dealing with more stress, and I think, you know, again, sometimes as parents, we get caught up in news, we get caught up in headlines, we get caught up in social media, and there's just more and more and more information. And you can just get into information overload. And it's good to be able to try to put that stuff aside, find out what you need to know, get the basics, put it aside, and go find time for yourself to do something that makes you feel good. It's really important, even as difficult as that might be, in a time where you are teaching, you are doing work, you are the janitor, you are cooking, you are doing laundry, and all these other things. It's still really, really important to make time for yourself. Also, I think, you know, give yourself a break, really. Under stress, we will all say and do things that we are not proud of in those moments. And I do think it is okay to go back and apologize for, that wasn't appropriate for me to say that. I was upset about something and I said something that is really not appropriate. And I think that we should, that we both need to sometimes work on things that are difficult. And how about if we figure out a way to handle a situation like that better next time? And I think that, kids will respect that, that you're taking ownership. And directly related to COVID and other national challenges that we face, how you discuss that with your child really is based on the child's age, their development, their temperament, whether or not they're dealing with other issues such as anxiety, depression. They don't need to know everything. And that kind of goes back to that first one, which is make time for yourself, because sometimes when we are so overloaded with information, we feel we need to dump it somewhere, and maybe we're saying more than we need to say, and it's causing stress because kids may not know how to handle it. They may not have the skills. And if you find yourself not handling situations at home in a way that is consistent with how you want to be as a parent, maybe it's time to talk with someone and get some help with that. That can be, another parent. It can be your pastor or priest. It can be, in terms of maybe some of the education things. It could be an education consultant, or it might be a therapist that you would address these issues with. And what we do want to do, though, I think, is, kids hear things. They hear all kinds of things that we don't necessarily even want them to hear, even if we're trying to not have them exposed to things. And so, again, based on the child's age, their development, their temperament, trying to provide them with enough information about what it is, very simply stated, maybe with the COVID, how does it spread, what is being done, and what they can do. And I think validating, age-appropriate things that they can do makes them feel a little bit more in charge and in control of the situation. So be that just washing your hands, covering your mouth when you cough, wearing a mask when you go out. Those are things that kids can do that have an impact on the spread of the disease. And they should be proud of being able to do those things. All right, and the next slide. Some other things that you can do at this time is increase your bonding time with your child. Be it a young child or an adolescent, set aside child-directed time. It can be playtime, it can be exercise time, but time that you're going to spend together. And take the time to tell your child what you appreciate about them and what they are doing well. Notice these things. The balloon game is just a fun little activity that I sometimes use in therapy with families, where you get different colored balloons. Each person has a color that's their balloon. And so maybe I have a blue balloon and you have a red balloon, and each person will then take a blue balloon and write something positive, some kind of positive affirmation. I like your smile. Today you made me happy when you played a game with me. Just any positive affirmation, put it inside the balloon, blow the balloons up, play around with the balloons, swatting them around and keeping them off the floor and all those kind of fun games. And then take the time to pop all the balloons in some fashion and read the affirmations aloud. And talk about how that feels to hear these positive things. And I would also recommend, trying, a lot of times kids are in a position where parent is the expert and they are the learner. Try something new together that neither of you have ever done before. And things that are hands-on, creative, artistic, those things are great to do. I also included another activity that I often do with kids in therapy, which is to create a totem. And totems are used in cultures to highlight characteristics about people that they value. And it can be animals, it can be faces and things like that. I often use pictures cut out of magazines as a way to do that, because drawing is not always a strength for kids with attention problems. And so we will choose, first choose different animals and then put them together and, glue it onto paper as a totem, and talk about, why they chose the specific animals they chose. What is the strength that that animal has that they admire or would like to have for themselves? And the other thing that you can do as a parent is just help your child connect with their friends virtually. So it may not be time quite yet for them to be hanging out a lot or going to people's houses and things like that. But even just to sit down and, when they have homework to do, having two kids on video with each other, even if they're not talking and they're just with each other, which might help kind of, have that same experience that they have at school. And then the last two slides are just resources. So some books, and then on the very last slide are some websites that are places I would say that have good information for parents about ADHD in particular. Any questions?
I don't see any questions yet in the chat, so feel free and add your questions in the chat. I know we're at the 8 o'clock point here, so if you have to go, we understand. I did have a question though, just to kind of back into the context of the COVID situation. I'm just curious what your stance is on managing screen time with kids for ADHD. Is that something that's more important for them in particular? Are there any kind of, just, I guess, is there a different lens to look at it for kids with ADHD, or any special considerations that should be made?
I think I would go with, standard in terms of amount of time during COVID. I think everybody's got much more access than might be typical. And part of it is, that school as well. And, but I think, in general, part of this is learning about regulation and how to regulate yourself and what's really good for you. So being on, just being on computers or video games or whatever else, the child is doing, that in of itself is not healthy. We need a variety of activities. Kids with attention problems need to be exercising daily. It's good to have art and or activities that are sensory in terms of maybe, painting or Play-Doh or working with dough and, things like that are, so we want to really, what's healthy for all kids is to have a variety of activities that they're participating in and to learn how to stop. So I think for a lot of kids, that's the biggest issue with videos, any kind of media, video games, etc., is how do you stop? And I think that's, again, part of it, just learning how to regulate.
We did have another question here that came in on what your opinion is on kids with ADHD who have habits like skin picking. And I know my sister with ADHD used to sit and pick at her hair, like scan for, split ends or whatever might be there, just those kind of, I guess, kind of physical habits.
Yeah. Some of those are really very specific. They are found in conjunction with ADHD, but may represent a tic-like behavior and or an OCD type of behavior. And there are some interventions that are specific to those kinds of activities that, working with a therapist, you might be able to get better management of.
Thank you. And then also, what's your opinion on the effectiveness of ADHD medications like Adderall? Is it good, bad, and different? And should parents have concerns about these medications, especially if there's any other underlying issues like depression or anxiety?
medication is helpful. um, so we're talking about a brain-based disorder, and what we're looking at with medication is a way to help that brain work more efficiently. And and yes, I think, you know, it is good to get as much information as you can. I think when you make that decision to put your child on medication, you are taking into consideration often a variety of things that are going on, not just do they have ADHD, but it may also include how are they doing in school? What are their peer relationships like? What is their mood like? Are they getting so frustrated with learning, with just their inability to follow directions, that this needs to be addressed more specifically? Are they unable to keep up in school? Or, you know, are the grades lower than they should be? There's, I think, a whole variety of things to look at in making that decision. And I think when you get to the point of that you're ready to make that decision, you know, talking with a psychiatrist who can help walk you through what are all the medical issues and side effects and, you know, things like that, that you should know as well. And I would say, you know, it's been my experience, I've been doing this for a very long time, that people don't jump into these decisions easily. That most people, you know, take a lot of things into consideration when making that decision. And I think that's as it should be.
Thank you. And a question on a different train of thought here. What's your experience with boys that have ADHD and learning a second language in school? I think that's probably leaning towards, like, are there specific difficulties that go along with that, or any other considerations?
It's really variable. You know, certainly if there are any language related struggles, which some kids who have LD, that's what primarily we're looking at, is some language related difficulties. Yes, learning a second language can be really challenging. For other kids who have ADHD, it is not an issue at all.
And that's kind of where I was thinking too, just from my background of thinking it a lot more with, is there, you know, something going along with the ADHD, like
right.
Something like that, and just more anecdotal, I guess, but also where we tend to, you know, position kids with dyslexia who have trouble with second language is usually with learning sign language, and that's something very physical.
Right.
And I know just through some personal experience of friends and family members with ADHD that learning sign language has actually come really easily to them because of that engagement and that tactile nature of it. Like you talked about movement, there's
right.
in
it. And it's not about spelling. So, you know, when you are first learning a second language, it is often about vocabulary and spelling and grammar. It's really not about speech per se. And so it's all the things that are particularly difficult for a lot of kids with attention problems. Some of that, you know, like attention to detail, in terms of even if they don't have a language problem, the attention to detail that is required for good spelling for some kids is much more challenging. Not all, but for some.
I could just think of too the level of mental effort into focusing on something where that requires a lot of memorization. Because now you're taking me back to my high school Spanish class, thinking that required a lot of studying with a lot of repetition, and I feel like it's something too difficult to, you know, maintain focus, because it you know, could be not that interesting to do. And
and it's so variable, because I have had other students that I have worked with who, you know, they're learning Japanese and Chinese, which are so different, and loving it, you know, and enjoying that adventure of, you know, taking something like that on.
That's cool. Well, that seems like a wrap up on our feed of questions here. So I want to thank you so much. I know I learned a lot just listening to you and made a lot of notes of things that I want to be sure to share with our clients and our instructors too, just as tips and tools that they can pass on to both students and parents. And I hope that everyone joining us got a lot out of this tonight. And thank you so much for your time, Dr. Cureton. I know you put a lot into this presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was, yeah, it was good to kind of bring all those thoughts back together again. And
wonderful. Well, have a great night, everybody. Thanks so much.